I think Maria started the discussion off right. And what she said essentially is that when people stand together, no matter how strong the opposition, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. Think of where we were 30, 40 years ago in terms of civil rights. And because of the work of Iowa, and because of people all over this country saying we're not going to judge a candidate based on the color of his skin, but by his ideas, we have elected the first African-American president. But that happened because for decades, millions of people stood up and said, we are going to do everything we can to end racism in the United States. Think of where we have come in terms of women's rights. I can remember back in 1981, when I was mayor of the city of Burlington, we appointed the first woman police officer. People thought it was a big deal. That's right, and people are laughing. But then it was a big deal. Now, more women than men in medical schools, more women than men in law schools. We are breaking down sexist barriers all over this country. And that happened because women and their male allies stood together and said, you know what? This country is going to treat all people equally, male or female. And then just think about the huge changes that have come into this country, not in the last 30 years, not in the last 20 years, just the last 10 years. Nobody here 10, 15 years ago would have believed that in conservative states throughout America, those states would be voting or passing legislation to allow for gay marriage. But millions of people, this doesn't happen by accident. Millions of people said, wait a second, my brother is gay. My friend is gay. We are going to end discrimination against gay people, and that is what's happened. So what's the point? The point is that change does not take place when a president signs a piece of legislation or when a Supreme Court makes a decision. Change takes place from the grassroots on up. And the good news is we have made real progress in recent years in creating a less discriminatory society, and we should be proud of that. But we must also recognize that there is one area where not only have we not made progress, but we have lost ground, and that is the economic struggle. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world. That's where we are today. Wealthiest country in the history of the world, but most Americans don't know that. You know why? Because they're working 2 or 3 jobs trying to survive. They can't afford to send their kids to college. I was in Des Moines a couple of months ago, talking to some people connected to an emergency food shelf, and they said 90% of the people going into the emergency food shelf were working people. But they're not earning enough money to feed their families. They're old people. in Iowa and in Vermont trying to survive on $12,000, $13,000 a year. Social Security, can't buy the medicine, can't buy the food they need. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world, but most people don't know it because almost all of the wealth and all of the income is going to the top 1%. And what we are here to say today is enough is enough. This country, this great country, and our government belong to all of us and not to a handful of billionaires, and that is what this campaign is about. I think today about my own state, and I think about Iowa, and I think about America. And I think about a middle class, a great middle class, a middle class that was once the envy of the world. People all over the world look to the United States and our middle class. And today, for the last 40 years, not 10, not 20, 40 years, this great middle class has been disappearing. And meanwhile, while the middle class disappears, while we have the highest rate of childhood poverty of any major country on earth, we have seen a proliferation of millionaires and billionaires. And what we are saying today, loudly and clearly, is that we need an economy that works for working families, not for billionaires. One of the fun things about running for president of the United States is that even if Congress doesn't like what you're talking about, even if the media doesn't like what you're talking about, we are going to push the truth out to the American people, no matter who likes it or not. And here is the truth. Here is the truth. That the United States of America today has more income and wealth inequality than any other major Western country on earth. That it is worse today in terms of inequality than at any time since 1928. That if you can believe it, just listen to this. The top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, top 1/10 of 1% owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. That is not what America is supposed to be about, and you and I are going to change that. America is not supposed to be about one family, the Walton family, owning more wealth, one family, than the bottom 40% of Americans. America is not supposed to be about 14 of the wealthiest, the 14 wealthiest people in this country, earning over the last 2 years $156 billion increase in their wealth, more wealth than is owned by the bottom 130 million Americans. All right? That is not what this country is supposed to be about. And what our job is to do is to create an economy that works for working moms. Our job is to create an economy that says that seniors can live with dignity. Our job is to say that we're going to create an economy in which we have the lowest rate of childhood poverty, not the highest of any major country. What this campaign is about is saying to the billionaire class, you can't have it all. You can't get huge tax breaks that the Republicans want to give you when children in America go hungry. You cannot continue to ship out jobs to China when millions of Americans desperately need work in this country. What we are saying to the billionaire class is their greed is destroying America, and we are going to stop that greed, whether they like it or not. When we talk about the economy, it's important to understand that real unemployment is not the 5.3% which you read about in the papers. Hope you all know that. Those figures, that government statistic does not include people who have given up looking for work and people who are working part-time when they want to work full-time. Add that all together, real unemployment is over 10%. And here's something that almost nobody talks about. We have a major crisis in this country in terms of youth unemployment. You all know that? I asked the Economic Policy Institute to do a study for me to find out what real youth unemployment was for young people who graduated high school between 17 and 20. This is what they found. If the kids are white, 33% real unemployment. Hispanic, 36%. African American, 51%. Okay? This is an issue that cannot be pushed underneath the rug. It's an issue that has to be dealt with, and I'll tell you why. Because if anybody here thinks there is not a connection between high youth unemployment and the fact that we have more people in jail than any other country, you would be sorely mistaken. We have 5.5 million young people in America, not in school, not at work. And many of them are hanging out on street corners in Iowa and in Vermont and all over this country. I believe that it is far more important for us to be investing in education and jobs rather than jails and incarceration. I want to get rid of this distinction of having more people in jail than other countries, and I want to replace that with the United States being the best educated country on earth. And when we talk about jobs and income, let's understand this. The reason that people are working 2 or 3 jobs, the reason that people are going to food shelves after working 40 or 50 hours a week is that millions of Americans are earning wages that are much, much too low. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. The federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. And together, we are going to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It is not a radical idea. It is an American idea. It is a conservative idea to say that if somebody works 40 hours a week, that person should not be living in poverty. And when we talk about wages and income, I hope every man here will stand with the women and demand pay equity for women workers.